Good morning, girls and boys. This is Chris, and today it's an interesting sketchpad conversation because we're talking about emotions. Emotions are the devil and heaven, all built into one. And I thought I'd use the emotional shower to take you through some of the thoughts I have on the topic of emotion. I hope you enjoy this, and please, once again, if you enjoy the video, like it, share it, subscribe, have fun. Bye for now. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Chris, and today, well, we're going to talk about emotion and find out if that's a dirty word. Is it or isn't it? Well, the answer is yes and no. If we draw two columns and we do a balance, emotion, the positive and the negative, what we find with emotion is that it's stimulating, it's fun, it's sexy, it's creative, it's entertaining, it's stories, it's romantic, it's enjoyable, it's energizing, it's truthful, it's what's another word for it? It's engaging. So you engage people, and it's motivating. You motivate. So there's the positive side, and I could go on for a very long time, as you well know. The negative side of emotion is it's petrol, so it can catch fire. It has its opposite. So for every upper, there's a downer. It can exhaust. It doesn't achieve much. So all high achievement comes without emotion. It drives guilt. It sits beneath fear, or it is fear. It's lower mind. It's distracting. It is very judgmental. It's very attached. It doesn't move on. It doesn't change. It's really hard to change your emotional reactions. It's very reactive, and it's quite violent. So we've got the positives and the negatives of this dirty word, or is of emotion, and we're trying to work out, is emotion a dirty word? We would then, in the process of, as you probably well know, in the process of working out the full balance of this equation, go to the negative of the positive. So let's just do a few. The negative of stimulation is tired, unsustainable. The negative of fun is that it's short-term and it's narcissistic. It's focused on, it can be at the cost of others. The downside of sex, I don't know. I do. Sorry, I was just joking there. The downside of sex is it's insatiable and leads to affairs. The downside of creativity is unstable. The downside of entertaining, it's delusional. So in other words, we start to lose the awareness between what's real and what's false, so delusion. Fantasy. So we can actually have a fantasy of who our partner is rather than a real perspective. Leads to stories, which are anchoring wounds and anchor beliefs. So beliefs and anchoring of beliefs and wounds, this is really bad news from the viewpoint of growth. It's romantic, but then therefore it's manipulable. Where if we're emotional, we're easily manipulated, both in a romantic sense and a product. Like in a car sales or in house sales or in a job or in whatever relationship, we're easily manipulated if we're highly emotional. It leads to enjoyment, which may not be negative in terms of what we really long-term want. It builds energy, but that energy can be quite, like a fly in a bottle. So it might be stimulating, but it may not lead to a result. So in other words, it's just a waste of time. It's truthful. We express our emotions, therefore it's truthful. The negative of that is we may not like the truth. Because many of us throughout our lives carry wounds, and that truth of those wounds is something we would prefer to disguise. It engages us in work, and once again, like a cow with a ring through its nose, it's easily led. Motivates us. Well, it motivates us, but the thing is, every time we get to the end of a motivating period and we find there's more motivation and more motivation, we get what's called burnout. And one of the biggest problems with emotion is the negatives of that is burnout. And many people suffer from it because they love being motivated, which means they love being on the positive side of emotion. So if you're burning out, it's because you're a believer in motivation. If you're a believer in motivation, you're a believer that emotion is not a dirty word. So let's look at the positives of the negatives. It's, what do we say? It's a tinderbox of petrol. The positive of this negative, a tinderbox of petrol, means that we're fully mindful. So in other words, we're awake. We're not falling asleep, and we're not following the beat of someone else's drum. I don't know what I meant by when I wrote the opposite, but depression, sadness, and a lack of love, because if we define love as an emotion, we will also have the negative of that, which is anger or hate. Anger is the opposite to love. So it's exhausting. What's the benefit of that? We get time out. We escape. It causes us to achieve things because it stimulates us. But the achievements lack satisfaction of the soul. And that's one's hard to explain here at this moment. But that's a fact of life. Everything we achieve with emotion does not nourish the soul. There's a great quote. It says, nothing of the senses ever satisfied the soul. Now I come down to my biggest enemy, guilt. There are only really two emotions in the whole wide world, and they are guilt and fear, and we hate both of them. But guilt leads to people wanting to have integrity. So moral codes, obedience, ethics. So all these positive words come out of the negative of emotion, which is guilt. So guilt also blocks memory, which helps us forget pain. So
positive of the negative of emotion is everything that people stand for in regard to an authenticity and all the other great words that corporate seem to, and values, all the other great words that corporate seem to totally addicted to come out of emotion being a dirty word, come out of the negative of emotion. Fear. Well, it's all fear is an emotion. We can only fear the future. We can't fear the past. We have guilt of the past, fear of the future. The only two emotions that exist. Everything else flows from them. Fear of the future makes us self-aware because it's not instinctive like an animal. Self-awareness, like what's going to happen next week, how am I going to pay the rent, where am I going, how am I going to eat, how am I going to provide. All that fear of the future creates a sense of self-awareness. That self-awareness also builds a level of predictability. It builds conformity in society. It builds values or culture in a business. Because people fear the future, they will become obedient to rules. And that's how we keep communities. So all communities in the world are built out of the fear of the future. It's lower-minded. In other words, emotion operates from a very primitive level of life, but there is something beautiful about the primal side of life, and there's a lot of people do primal eating, primal exercise, primal this, primal that. And the monkey in the cage is the consequence. So the positive of this low thinking, this primal sense, is a reconnection to the earth. So when anyone starts saying, oh, I don't like modernization, I don't like progress, I don't like deforestation, I don't like genetically modified food, what they're operating out of is very low emotion, but that's driving them to be very preservative in the world. So that's the positive of low emotion, preservation of the past. So it's distracting. The benefit of being distracted is that in the terms of the growth path, we grow at the border of chaos and order. And sometimes when the chaos gets too big, we go to emotion for distraction. Sometimes when the order gets too big and we get bored, we attract emotion for distraction. So if we're growing in big chunks of order and chaos, emotion distracts us and gives us some sense of relief, so we can stay on the journey and in some ways stay on path to grow. It's very judgmental. Well, if we don't know what we judge, we don't know the truth. So a lot of people say we shouldn't judge. That is not the truth. We must judge. If we don't judge, we're not human. The question is, do we react to those judgments or we act on those judgments? Act means to balance the judgment and therefore kill it. React means to validate the judgment. So the positive of judgment, which comes from emotion, is all spirituality, which may surprise some people right now. It causes us to be attached. Well, without attachment, there is no family. So, in a sense, the negative attachment that's triggered by emotional connection to people breeds us a sense of wanting to be in family. And family is a great thing from the point of view of preservation and care for the children, because if we had no attachment, we might be prone to jump and run. It prevents change, which, again, from all points of view, is stability. That's the positive of it. It's reactive. Well, reactionariness in the world is not necessarily a bad thing. Reactionary is just energy in motion. In other words, instead of going up towards our vision, inspiration, and purpose, we go to positive emotion and negative emotion. That TikTok feeds all marketing, all hospitals because we get sick from it. It feeds all relationships. It feeds all business. It feeds all politics. So if we were able, if it weren't for the negative of emotion, which causes us to react, we would not have the commercial world we live in. We would have a communist state. And the communist state is where everything turns beige. And as we know from the attempts of Mao and people in the past, it doesn't sustain itself. So reaction is really important to keep the wheels of this planet in motion. It's violent. And, well, do we have a benefit to violence? Well, it may surprise you, but there are 7 areas of life, as you know from Total Human Awareness, what you've studied already. There's spiritual, mental, social, career, financial, health, and relationship. And so there's violence in each one. Social violence is Facebook, which is opinion, and freedom of speech. Mental violence is on self. When we become self-critical, there's a benefit to that too. Spiritual, mental, what do we say? Social, mental, spiritual. If we weren't spiritually violent, we would be stuck in a perception of ourselves. Our view would be blocked. So spiritual violence is all sorts of illness. What do we call it? When we get humbling circumstances, calamities, and disasters. As you know, I believe there are no accidents. Humbling circumstances, calamities, and disaster are nature's way of violating us, shattering our delusions. So there's that violence. Financial violence, well, when there's robbery, when there's someone doesn't pay you, this is someone breaks the integrity of a deal. These are all financial violences that teach us how to be better at building business. Health violence is when we eat shit, when we drink too much, when we don't exercise, when we impose on ourselves. But the great thing about health violence, it teaches us to appreciate what we've got. So if you don't appreciate your body, health violence will intrude to make you appreciate it. And relationship violence, well, as you know, there's a hierarchy of violence. There's the physical down the bottom, which is outlawed. But nobody does to us more than we do to ourselves. So I understand there's a law against domestic violence, and I stand for that law, and I help reinforce it when I find that situation. But most of the violence we talk about in relationship is abusive in terms of emotional, and we love to be the victim. But in nature's violence, there is no victim. There is simply somebody doing to us what we're doing to ourselves. If somebody's not being loving and romantic, we're not being loving and romantic. If somebody's not being kind and caring, we're not being kind and caring to ourselves. If someone doesn't think that we're worthy of intimacy, it's because we don't think we're worthy of intimacy with ourselves. So nobody does to anything. So that's a beautiful reflection. So all the violence of emotion has an equal and opposite balance in the positive. So this is an answer to your question. Emotion, is that a dirty word? Well, I hope through this little conversation that you realize it is a dirty word, yes, and it is a dirty word, no. It's balanced, and therefore you get to choose the level of emotion that you want to operate at. And that is how to be inspired. So it's not by condemning emotion or saying emotion's bad. It's by moving to a point where we rise up through the emotional pyramid and say, I don't need to operate down here in the lower realms of the emotional pyramid, because I'm going to set structure in place on a daily basis that gives me daily reinforcement to prevent myself falling into this level of emotion. It's not bad. It's not good. It's good with bad, and it's bad with good. What it is emotion. Up here, there's less of it, and there's more motion.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. There's more motion than emotion, and therefore the motion is in the direction of what you want long term instead of what you react to in the short term. I hope you've enjoyed this. Once again, if you have, give it a like, share it around, and have a beautiful day. Bye for now.